I actually think they're more valuable to us not being on the board.
If you had to appoint a celebrity to your board, who would it be and why?
We've got a lot of ambassadors, brand ambassadors. So I actually think they're more valuable to us not being on the board.
How do you manage the work-life balance?
I think when you're operating at this level and, I don't see it as a job. I do think that you can only do this if you've really got somebody else in the equation. And there I must give a shout out to my wife. We've adopted a hybrid working model that has actually turned out to be brilliant for us as an organization. And it's not about the hours that you actually spend in the office, it's the output of the work. I do, however, worry that young people coming in from a career perspective, need to actually engage more in a sort of face-to-face environment.
Hello and welcome to Boardroom Uncovered from City AM with me, Jon Robinson. My guest for this episode is Neville Koopowitz, the CEO of health and life insurer Vitality. While attempting to make its mascot, Stanley the Dachshund, the best-loved dog in corporate Britain, has Vitality really succeeded in making the UK healthier in return for an Apple Watch? Without any further delay, let's dive in. Well, Neville, thank you very much for coming on Boardroom Uncovered today. It's great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
The only place to start is by talking about Stanley the Dachshund. Tell me about how the dog has become such a symbol of the company.
Well, it's a very interesting sort of evolution of our brand. We have been a business that's had a very strong core purpose of making people healthier and enhancing and protecting their lives. And in 2014, when we launched the Vitality brand, after we had bought out the remaining shares from Prudential, we had to rebrand the organization, and that's hence when we started using the Vitality name. But it was very important for us to actually get our message across. And our message across meant that we actually wanted people to change their behaviors, live a healthy lifestyle, because that would be good for them, obviously. It's good for us as an insurer, and society is a beneficiary. How best could we bring that to life? And that's when Stanley was born as a concept of this, dog out there that is a little bit, nose out of joint because their owner's starting to get healthy. They would prefer to live, a lazy life on the couch. So he was really there as a detractor to actually put the point across that we know it's tough, we know it's difficult, it's easier to, lie in bed than go out for a walk or a run. And that's how the character was built. And it's been quite remarkable how that has resonated, with the general sort of consumer out there, because it really is the metaphor and the for good health.
Stanley started off a little bit mean, didn't he?
I wouldn't say mean. I would say as I said, his nose was out of joint because he now, had to do things that he wasn't, very happy about. And that's getting more active. But over the years, he's actually evolved to actually embrace this new way of living. And I think he's a very smart person and understands, that if you can look after your health, it's good for all parties. And as such, he's evolved to actually being a bit of an evangelist for the brand now. So it's been quite a remarkable transformation.
And you've got 4 at home, haven't you? 4 Stanleys.
Yes, I do.
What's that like? There must be a lot to deal with.
It's a bit chaotic, but my wife is an absolute dog lover. I've got 4 kids, 4 dogs, so I'm number 9 in the pecking order. But hopefully, as my kids have left home, I'm making my way back up again.
And I suppose as well as Stanley, it's the promotion that you've had about giving away a free Apple Watch as part of a policy that's really caught people's imaginations. Was that promotion a success for you?
So we don't like to see it as a promotion. It's something that's embedded in our product. At the fundamental heart of what we're trying to do is to get people healthier. And one of the aspects of getting people healthier is actually equipping them with either wearable technology or discount at the gym or whatever the case may be. And the Apple Watch has been a great example of giving people the ability to actually get an Apple Watch, and if they remain healthy and they do their activities, they don't actually have to pay for it. So it's much more of an enabler for them to get healthier as opposed to a promotion.
Tell me about how you struck that deal with Apple then. I'm assuming you didn't just ring up Tim Cook and say, I've got this great idea for you.
It's interesting that this was done at a global sort of vitality level, and buy-in right from the top of Apple to actually partner with them. Apple, as you are probably aware, are very, very conscious about their brand and partnering with other organizations. And I'm pleased to say that this has been one of their better partnerships. They are fully engaged. And that's very, very important for us, because the actual customer journey, our members' journey of actually signing on with us and then getting the Apple Watch is seamless and needs that collaboration with them.
You're absolutely right that Apple are they guard their reputation quite jealously, quite closely. You know, famously in films, the good guys have Apple, the bad guys never have Apple, they have another brand. But insurers across the board generally in this country, a lot of the time they're seen as the bad guys. But the fact that Apple have chosen to partner with you, they obviously don't see you as that, but you would come back against that challenge as well, I'm assuming.
Well, I think, from our perspective, whilst we are an insurer, we've got I believe, a far greater purpose around making people healthier. And it's very interesting. We came up with this sort of purpose 30 years ago when we started the organization. And people were saying to us, well, what's making people healthier got to do with insurance? But the link, the causal link between health and risk is so obvious that it's been, a fundamental part of our business model. So whilst we are in insurance, I don't believe Apple see us as a traditional insurer. They see Vitality as a program that actually assists people getting healthier, and they can be a component of that.
I suppose if I was being very cynical, I'd say that you'd want everybody who buys your policies to be healthy because you would make more profit as a result because there's fewer payouts.
Yeah, and I don't think that's cynical. I think that's actually purposeful because, we call it the shared value insurance model. If we can make our members healthier, it's good for them. They get rewarded for it in our program. But it's also good for us because the actuarial dynamics of a healthier population, as you said, and the data is there to actually back that up. Healthier people are less likely by 29% to be hospitalized. And our latest stat that I think is very, very powerful is, going through our data over a longitudinal sort of study has actually shown that if you engage in the Vitality program, you can actually extend your life by 5 years. So, it really is good for the members, it's good for us, and society is the beneficiary. So there are very few business models where there are no losers. And we like to think of ours as one of those.
Okay. Let's take it right back to the start. So obviously, people watching this, people listening to this will realise that you're not originally from these shores. Tell me about growing up in South Africa and how you've managed to wind yourself up here.
Well, growing up in South Africa, it was quite a divisive society. So, I lived in South Africa through the transition from apartheid to democracy, which in itself was a fantastic experience. Didn't come without its challenges. And quite frankly, the country went through significant transformation. And, Mandela was absolutely iconic, as you know, in actually bringing the country together. So there were many, many challenges, but it was an exciting time. And that is the time that we actually started our business in South Africa. It's under the name of Discovery in South Africa. But it was very, very important for us as an organization to actually embrace this new world. And one of the areas that was under significant pressure in South Africa was the provision of healthcare. So we entered the marketplace, but we had a very different purpose around making people healthier as a way of containing healthcare costs. And that's where the model started evolving.
So you came to the UK, you've taken on the Vitality brand, you've launched that just over 10 years ago. You've had an awful long time at this company. Your leadership style must have changed over that point from when you first took on the top job to now as we sit here.
I don't think the leadership style has changed, but I think things have evolved. As you start a company, you've got very different challenges. As the company grows, you've got another set of challenges, and as it matures, you've got a different set of challenges. So I would like to think that the fundamentals of leadership and what we have done as an organization around our values, around our core purpose, has remained steadfast and the same over the period of time. And I think if you've got that grounding of that strong sort of set of values and the way that you can operate within the boundaries of those values, yes, you're going to go through different stages of evolution of a business, but the fundamentals stay the same.
What kind of a leader are you then? How would you describe your leadership style?
I mean, I subscribe to probably the most important thing is surrounding myself with the best people. I like to make sure that there's a lot of challenge around decision making, but once decisions are made, I believe very firmly that execution needs to actually take place. You know, that doesn't mean to say that we can't revisit a decision, but, you know, as a leader, people actually, I think, respect decisiveness. They respect, you know, the fact that there's no ambiguity and they know what they've got to do. But very importantly is telling people why we're going down a path or going in that direction. And that, I believe, is a fundamental sort of key element of leadership, is actually taking people on the journey with you. And we often, myself included, sometimes forget, you know, we're so busy on our day-to-day activity, we've got to, you know, take a step back and actually explain the why to people. But it's about getting brilliant people around you, and that's what I love about our organization. We've got, you know, strong people who are challenging, but at the same time, you know, one of our sort of leadership charter principles is, you know, we can debate and we can argue and we can do whatever we want in the meeting room, but we leave as a united front. And most times, I have to tell you, it's basically on consensus. There are very, very few times where I've had to, as a leader, you know, take a position that has left people completely uncomfortable. You know, I would rather spend more time getting people on board and hearing all the different opinions and views.
In those times where you have to take a position which is maybe contrary to the majority of your senior leadership team, how does that sit with you?
Well, when I say the majority, I probably wouldn't have taken, I can't think of a time when the majority of the leadership team were actually against something that I wanted to do. It's typically getting some of the minority of the people over the line. I would probably err on not doing it because I have such trust in the people around the table with me. And, you know, we very, very, you know, it's a very flat structure that we operate in. Everybody's got equal say, you know, at that around the table. And, you know, we've tried to create a culture of, you know, people must speak their minds. And it's not a culture, I have to tell you, that everybody can actually operate within.
No, I can imagine not. How does leadership sit with you? Is it comfortable?
Sure, that's an interesting question. I think I haven't really known any other way, you know, in terms of, I've had leadership roles throughout my career, through schooling, and I've always liked to actually get much more involved. So I would say it sits comfortably with me, but making sure that I've actually am surrounded by the right team. You can't be a good leader or lead in isolation.
Looking over your career to date, obviously, you know, no successful career is a straight line upwards. There's some successes, there's some failures. Talk to me about one of the biggest successes that you've had up to this point.
Sure.
Something that sticks out to you.
I think the big success was that sort of seminal moment in the evolution of our business where we actually launched the Vitality Program. That was in 1997. And it was done on almost like a hunch that if we actually incentivize people to change their behavior, you know, it will be good for us, it will be good for them. And we went out into the marketplace fairly naively because we had no data at that particular point in time. But it was a strong conviction that if we did this, it could actually change insurance for the better. So I still look back at that as, it was pretty high stakes when you're actually making a fundamental shift. It wasn't, received brilliantly by the market because they'd never seen anything like this before. We got a lot of attack from our competitors. Why are we spending hard-earned healthcare pounds on rewards and incentives as opposed to care and treatment? So we had a road to travel, and getting us to where we are today with the scale of our global organization, being in 41 markets, partnering with some of the biggest insurance companies in the world, is part of a long journey, and that's probably one of the sort of key sort of moments that stand out for me.
Of course, there's the other side of that coin, isn't there? There's maybe things in your career that's not gone to plan. Something stick out to you in particular?
Look, I think there's always going to be challenges when you're running a big business. I mean, COVID was a big challenge for us as an insurer. As a health insurer, it was a challenge because, the first 3 months there was just no availability of treatment in the private sector, if you recall. Another challenge that we've had now is that post-COVID, from a health insurance perspective, we've seen a reset of private medical insurance, and we've had to impose significant premium increases as an industry to actually get the balance right again. So those are really tough challenges where you've got a combination of trying to actually create stability, but at the same time making sure that you're delivering for your customers.
You say that the premiums have gone up in recent years. Do you ever see a situation where they're going to come down in the near term?
No, I don't see a situation where they're going to come down. I think we have reset, and that's for numerous reasons. Firstly, they've gone up. Maybe just to give you a little bit more detail, the underlying medical inflation has gone up. When, post-COVID, we've had these massive sort of consumer price index inflation increases, and then that has a knock-on impact on provision of healthcare services. Think about a hospital. Big electricity bills, big staffing bills. So the cost of actually the provision of care went up, and that's a direct function of what your insurance premiums would be. But over and above that, we had a definite shift in people actually valuing their private medical insurance. And one of the key fundamental changes that we actually saw was pre-COVID, private medical insurance was for elective surgery in hospital, the ability for people to actually get their surgery quicker. Post-COVID, it's a much more integrated system. People want private primary care services like GP services, mental health services. So we've seen a dramatic increase in the utilization of those services, which is a good thing because it alleviates pressure off the NHS, number one. And number two, people have now started to value their private medical insurance a lot more. So there are pros and cons to it, but the premium increases are a function of those two areas. Increasing in inflation, but also, and equally important, is the increase in utilization. So people are actually using the benefits and extending that sort of remit of benefits.
You mentioned earlier about having 4 kids, 4 dogs, and you got a full-time job as a CEO of one of the biggest companies in the UK. How do you manage the work-life balance?
Sure. I get asked that question. I'm not very good at it, to be honest. I think when you're operating at this level, and I don't see it as a job. I see it as just part of what I've been doing, and they do blur. There's no question. I think COVID was particularly challenging in that regard because suddenly your office became was your home, was your school, was your gym, everything was there. So the blurring of those boundaries is quite challenging. But I do think that you can only do this if you've really got somebody else in the equation. And there I must give a shout out to my wife. She takes the major brunt of making sure that the family is being looked after. Not that I don't do anything, but it's a partnership. And I can tell you now, without somebody who's understands the equation, it's very, very challenging.
Obviously, you're bringing in a lot of income with your job, just naturally as being a CEO of Vitality. But as a father, do you ever feel a certain level of guilt because you're not at home maybe as much as you would have been in another role?
I mean, you do have those times, especially when you're traveling overseas. But I did make time, and I love sport, and I love watching my children play sport. So I did make sure that I was always there when I could be there. Some of the stuff, to be honest, helping with homework and that type of stuff, I'm probably not that upset that I don't have to always do that. But my kids also are very understanding, and when I'm with them, we spend quality time as a family. But they also, as they grow up, they get into their own worlds, their own friends, etc. And my kids are grown up now. So, but through that process, there is no doubt there are some sacrifices to be made.
And whilst we're talking about home, I wanted to ask you about work from home policy. What is it at Vitality, and what are your thoughts on that?
Well, we've adopted a hybrid working model that has actually turned out to be brilliant for us as an organisation. We've gone to 2 days compulsory in the office, and interestingly enough, the sort of attendance in those 2 days we're sitting at about 97-98%. So people actually understand the reason why they've got to come into the office, and the way that we've actually structured it is that teams come in and there's collaboration. It doesn't help that everybody just decides when they're going to come in, and it doesn't, end up teams meetings in the office to people at home. So we've been very deliberate about the way that we actually have structured it. Also, we've got a lot of mechanisms and tools that can actually measure productivity, the technology that we've empowered our people with from their homes. And that was one of the positive things that came out of COVID, is we were forced to, in a very short space of time, make sure that the technology was in place, and it's improved over a period of time. So from my perspective, I think it's working exceptionally well, especially with young families, people with young kids, the ability for them to actually have the ability to do things beyond their work and not compromise on their work, I think is very, very important. And it's not about the hours that you actually spend in the office, it's the output of the work. And I think a lot also depends on the culture of the organization. I do, however, worry that young people coming in from a career perspective, need to actually engage more in a sort of face-to-face environment. And we're actually starting to see that. So whilst we've got the 2 days, there's some instances where people are coming in 5 days, where they're coming in 4 days or 3 days, is working really, really well for us. Our, staff sentiment, we measure that every 6 months. It's at its highest level. And I think the important other thing that we've done is we've changed our office environment to actually be more conducive, some more collaboration areas. We've made the sort of canteen area the heart of
it's not just rows of desks so the eye can see.
So, people actually come in and they feel the vibe, and that's important for us, because there is nothing better than that collaboration and just sort of, having a quick chat over a cup of coffee or at the water cooler.
Vibes are important at Vitality, it seems. Yes. Yeah. But lots of people in your position would say, 4 days a week, 5 days a week in, and that's what we want to happen. That's right for our culture. We've seen in recent days about WPP, Alan Sugar coming out and saying, they want people back to the office. So it's slightly surprising that you're so relaxed about only having people in 2 days a week.
I guess it's because the results are there. I probably wouldn't be that relaxed if we hadn't seen the results. But we're very much data-driven in everything that we do. So we want to measure sentiment. We want to measure productivity. And, it's my sense is that, once you legislate, people will maybe rebel a bit. We've seen people come in more than the 2 days. But, it's working for us. And I'm actually quite proud of the way that the business has actually sort of embraced it. And the nice thing about it is it's equitable for everybody. irrespective. I've got to be in 2 days a week. I'm normally in 3 to 4 days a week. I have a lot of calls around the world, so it makes sense for me to do some of them at home. Irrespective of where you are in the organization, the same rules apply.
And those employees who are coming into the office, when you're walking around, you're having meetings with them, you're meeting them, what are the top 3 qualities that you think makes a good employee?
Well, I would say the top quality is fit around the culture, somebody who subscribes to our core purpose and values. And it's actually quite interesting because a lot of people actually come to our organization because they actually can relate and want to be part of what we're trying to do. So I think that's a very, very important aspect. We look for smart people. We're not apologetic about that. But very importantly, people who can collaborate, who can bring ideas to the table. And often when I'm interviewing senior executives or people I want to bring into the organization, there's an expectation that they would come in and actually give us new ideas, or what's the point? So we try and encourage that. So it's very much around that cultural fit. For example, if we're putting a senior executive, we've recently had a retirement, had to replace senior executives, I ensured that my entire exco interviewed the person and was comfortable. And it was on a veto basis. If there was one person who was uncomfortable, because it just takes that one grape in the bunch that can, upset the ecosystem, and that is very, very important.
We're going to do something slightly different. We're going to start a new feature for 2025 for Boardroom Uncovered. We've got 6 quick fire questions that I'm going to shoot at you, and we're going to try and compare your answers to future guests. Okay. So no pressure at all, but you are the first guinea pig. But the first question is, what was your first job?
My first job was in an insurance company in their marketing and sales division.
Who inspires you?
The one person that has been the biggest inspiration was Nelson Mandela.
If you had to appoint a celebrity to your board, who would it be and why?
It's an interesting question, that, because we've got a lot of ambassadors, brand ambassadors. So I actually think they're more valuable to us not being on the board, because they are very carefully chosen as people that can actually deliver our message of a healthy lifestyle. And that's why people like Jess Ennis, Johnny Wilkinson, Maro Toji, those ambassadors are really powerful advocates of our business model. So I probably wouldn't want to have a celebrity on the board.
Okay, Stanley the dog then. We'll leave it at that. What was the best thing about your job?
The best thing about my job, I guess, is the people and the impact and the difference that we can make. I get letters from people who have changed their lifestyle and had early detection of illness, and writing to me and saying, thanking Vitality for actually potentially saving their lives. We've got many examples of that. And that difference is what actually makes it worth it at the end. But I guess it's the people around me, and it's just that sort of, that naive optimism that we can just achieve things that drives me.
And if you weren't doing this, what would you be doing?
No, that is a tough question, because I've got to answer that question down the line. The blurring of the boundaries between, other interests, etc. I guess I'd like to be doing something where I can make an impact on society. The fact that I've been able to do that, as well as run a business and become financially fortunate through that, has been a bonus. So there's nothing specific that obviously if I was talented as a youngster, I'd love to have been a sports star, but that wasn't going to happen.
Who would you have played for?
Well, depends which sport.
Well, indeed, rugby, for example.
Rugby would definitely have aspired to play for the Springboks.
Yeah.
Cricket, but closer between South Africa and England.
Yeah. If you were Prime Minister for the day, what would you do?
That's a tough one, because I don't think you can really achieve much in a day. So I would probably spend that day making sure I surround myself with the right cabinet, the right people who can actually execute, and spend that time trying to actually articulate and understand what the country needs and how best we can actually deliver it.
Brilliant. Well, we'll see what your answers compare to everyone else down the line. Thank you. Do you consider yourself successful?
Well, it depends on how you measure success. I think if I look at the impact that our business has had on our members and their change in behavior and getting them healthier, that to me is probably the best measure of success. So yes, in that regard, I think we have been successful. I don't want to credit any of that to myself alone, because you can't do it yourself. So I think it's our business model that actually drives the success. So as a business model and as a business, we've been extremely successful in the UK. We've covered nearly 2 million lives now on our health and life insurance. And we hopefully are playing a significant role in society as well.
Are you able to take a step back and look at your career and consider whether you have, where you've come from, where you are now? Do you consider yourself personally a success?
Yeah, I think, I wouldn't change anything. I'm always a firm believer that, timing is important, and different roles within the organization. I only really know this organization I've been with. In truth, I've been there nearly 30 years from the start. So it's much more of a, our business as opposed to I work for an organization. But if I look back, the sort of diverse nature of, being in South Africa, then coming to the UK, then running the health business, getting much more involved now in the global business. It's those sort of elements of when was the time right to move that I've actually been quite fortunate. And that, I think, has led to a lot of the success.
We spoke earlier about sort of the top 3 qualities for an employee. What top 3 qualities do you look for in a senior leader when you're interviewing them? I
think very similar. The fit is the ability to take responsibility and accountability. I often say to people, you may inherit something that you weren't responsible for, but going forward, you're actually accountable. So you can look back about all the issues, or you can look forward about how you're going to solve them. So I'm looking for people who are proactive, coming with solutions. I like to challenge, people must raise issues because you don't want to be naive to those issues, but at the same time, they can't just raise issues without solutions. So I'm looking for solution-oriented people who can lead teams and get that message down to the teams. And that is critically important. That's our biggest challenge as a leadership team, and leadership in general, I feel, is the ability to actually get the message through middle management down to the actual people on the ground. And that is a big challenge. So I'm looking for those type of attributes of people. And then the culture fit, people generally that would want to come to our organization, subscribe to our values. We've got a very strong set of values, which are quite challenging. They may just be words on a piece of paper, but the way that people actually live their values is very, very important. So, you've got to be comfortable that the people you bring into the organization can actually live your values. Of course, you're at the other side of the interview right now, but when you're on my side and you're interviewing a senior leader to join the company, do you have a particular question that you always ask that is revealing? Not really. I'm not one of those that tries to trick them in, what would you be if you weren't human? What color would you be? It's I've read up about those type of things. I think it's getting a deeper understanding of what makes that person tick. And, over years of experience, you can pick up pretty quickly if that person's going to is the real deal, has got that value system, and actually will fit into your organization. So when I'm interviewing somebody, a potential senior executive, I'm thinking how they're going to react to X, Y, or Z, how they're going to react to this situation, to that situation. So I probe a lot on that. And obviously everybody's trying to give you the answer that they think you want to hear. So often during my interviews, I actually try to discourage the people from actually joining, saying, are you sure you actually want this? Because you say that you have these values. You say that you can work in a bit of a chaotic, sort of organized chaos and fast-paced, etc. But do you actually really mean that? And have you done that before? And give me examples of where you've done that. Because presumably they've gone through rounds and rounds of interviews, maybe to get to speak to you. And then you're saying, are you sure you actually want to join us? Actually, interestingly, at the most senior levels, I like to see the shortlist first. So for, a big position, I'd probably see 8 people first, and then I would want my colleagues to see them. So I don't like this sort of filtering through the process. Obviously when you're interviewing lots and lots of people within the organization, there's structure that goes with it. But typically, I would spend a lot of time with the firm that is actually doing the search for us to actually articulate exactly what I'm looking for. And that relationship with that search firm is absolutely critical, because a good search firm will get into your psyche to actually understand what you're looking for. And we've had very good experiences with that, with search firms, where a lot of time is taken for them to actually understand what we're looking for. And then, yes, we're completely unapologetic for, some people have gone through 10, 12 interviews. The chairman of our board would interview them. The founder, our CEO and founder in South Africa would interview them. So it's important that we get the sort of cross-sectional sort of views of different people who will ask and look for different traits in the person.
And whilst I've got you here, I've got to ask you a couple of questions just about your thoughts on the government's growth agenda at the moment. It's always in the headlines for one reason or another. What are your thoughts on how the government is doing and trying to drive growth in the UK?
So I think the narrative is spot on. We have to drive growth. But, at the same time, we've also got to be understanding that, this country looked after its people during COVID. There was a significant amount of government support during that. And the reality is that, we've got to balance things out. So it's a very tricky sort of balancing act of growth versus, borrowings, etc., and how we actually, how the government actually does that. But I believe the noises and the narrative are right about this growth agenda. We'll just have to wait and see.
Finally, what do you think it takes to be a good CEO?
I think you've got to surround yourself with great people. And that's, as I said, at home, there's the other half of the equation has to actually be supportive. You've got to make sure that you've got great people around you that can actually allow you to do your job. And I've never been short of that. And the ability to actually get people to think, around the values, around our purpose. We don't want the same type of people, but they've got to bring different ideas, different sort of skills to the table. But I guess the one thing, and I've learned over the years as I've grown, is listening more. I think when you're young and enthusiastic, sometimes you don't listen as much as you should. I found that listening actually is key. And then probing questions. My role is to actually ask questions of my people, and get them to actually answer those questions. So it helps me from an understanding point of view and helps me to give guidance as well. So it's very difficult to just see one attribute. But it's about people. It's about surrounding yourself with the best people. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that people face, because sometimes, especially in middle management, they don't want to employ somebody that may be better than them. I've always had that sort of, fortunately had that attitude and haven't felt threatened by saying, I actually need to employ somebody who's actually better than me. Because if they're not better than me, what are they going to add? So I think that takes a level of maturity over a period of time. And I do worry going forward with, what's happening in society with young people, etc., and the way that, companies are just looking at, who's got the best CV without actually understanding, the impact that actual humans can have. We've just got to be careful of that.
Brilliant. Neville Koopowitz, CEO of Vitality. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Cheers.